Welcome to The Secrets of Success. By following the proven techniques of the guests who appear on this series, you'll learn that even successful people run into detours and failures, and how you can apply their success techniques to change your life.
You're now listening to the most unique show on radio, the show dedicated to making you a success. Deconstructing Fear can be life-changing. Today, our guest, Dr. Todd Pressman, will show us how. Todd, thanks for being with us today.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Todd, throughout your book, Deconstructing Fear, you mention the words fear and anxiety. Are they the same thing, or is one the father and the other the son?
That's a great question. You know, in my field, psychology, they like to make a distinction, and they say fear is about something imminent, right here and now, and anxiety is an anticipation of the future. I think it's really important, and this comes from, ancient Buddhism and modern psychology as well, to realize anytime we're anticipating the future, it's having the effect on us as if it were happening now. And that's important not only because it makes the distinction between fear and anxiety unnecessary, but it helps us realize how the mind works. It's not really about what's going on outside of us. It's about how we're interpreting it. So even if we're thinking about something that's not happening outside of us, it's just the same as if it were. We're interpreting it as a scary thing now, and that's what we have to work with if we're going to get some healing.
And that's what I was going to bring up, because I saw a sentence in your book about fear being an illusion. Is that the case? I mean, the little kid is afraid of the monster under the bed, and parents, we all know there's no monster under the bed, but as adults, we're afraid of certain things too. Is it real, or is it an illusion?
Another great question. I'm happy to say it is pure illusion in the sense that doesn't mean that there won't be some difficult things that happen, of course, but it means that they never play out the way we imagine. Whenever we're anticipating something awful and it actually comes to pass, it's totally different than we've expected. At most, we have one problem to deal with at a time. And one of the distortions of fear, as I talk about them, is that it makes us imagine all the terrible things that could happen will happen at once. That's why it's so overwhelming and paralyzing. But at most, we have one problem to deal with at a time, and the good news is we can deal with it. Whatever the situation, we can always manage the problem. Most of the time, however, we find out there was no there. It was just an idea in childhood that we've been carrying all along, and it's been distorting, our lives and our opportunity for happiness and fulfillment for no good reason. So I like to say it's like pulling back the curtain on Man and the Wizard of Oz. You see that it's just a harmless old guy back there moving some levers and dials and not this big scary hologram.
I think that would be a good picture for the cover of your book. Tom, what about the role of perception? Is that really what, I guess, messes us up? If we think it's going to be difficult, I'll never pass the bar exam, the CPA test, the final exam. Is that a important piece of the puzzle?
It sure is an important piece of the puzzle, but there's another piece that we want to get really clear on as we deconstruct anxiety, which is why I named my book that. And that's that we have a thought first, just as you said, I might not pass the CPA exam. And then that projects out into what we call the world, which we don't really have access to. We don't know what's going on out there. We only know our perception of it, right? And how many times have any of us seen that our perception can be completely wrong? Somebody looks at us cross-eyed and we think, oh, they don't like us. And then we find out that, they had some tragedy in their life, and it changes our perception completely. Anytime I'm working with a client and they have a big breakthrough, they are going to say something about how their perception looks so different. Everything looks brighter and more positive and more optimistic. So absolutely, perception, if we can get our hands on those controls, we have some real power to make change, because it's not objectively about what's going on out there. It's just about our perception, our interpretation based on our thoughts that make this picture out there, and we can get some real control over that, like I say.
Would it be fair to say that at any given time we're all afraid of something, or let's say 98% of us?
Yeah, I think you probably saw that piece in my book where I talk about the ubiquity of fear. Ubiquity means it's everywhere. And yes, actually, now we're really getting down to it. I say that our minds at any one moment are composed of two things, either fear or fulfillment, a drive to protect ourselves from fear or a drive to reach for fulfillment. And if we're looking for our fulfillment, guess what happens? We interrupt that process. You see children, right? They don't stop that process. They just go with their impulse. And that's what creates them, such fulfillment. It's clear to see. Babies especially are totally happy and joyful. If they're not, they scream for a second and then they get their need met and back to joy. But we interfere with that by saying, is it safe? We have to check our fear first. And then what do we find? Of course, there's something to take care of, a fear that we have to get some safety around. And then we say, well, let me take care of that first, and then I'll get on to my fulfillment. And then another problem comes up. I have to take care of that, and then I'll get on. And we go on like this for our entire lives. And as the Chinese like to say, don't postpone joy, or we're always preparing to live. We're waiting to get to that point, like we knew in childhood, where we can just unabashedly go for our fulfillment and find what really turns us on and not check the impulse of fear over much to stop us from getting that fulfillment.
And I read in your book, and I think it's a quick statement, but certainly true, fear actually distorts the truth. Is that kind of the mantra that goes through?
Yeah, actually, I'm glad you picked that line out in the very beginning of the book, because I say this is an irrefutable truth. This is how you know for sure that fear is an illusion, because you can't be willing to look at things objectively if you've got fear going on. Fear says you have to look at things in a way that makes you feel safe. And that means we're going to deny a whole lot of things. We're going to exaggerate the importance of other things, all because that's what makes us feel safe. We're never looking at the truth. There's a wonderful quote from Michel de Montaigne. It says, "My life was filled with terrible misfortunes, most of which never happened." Right? We're not looking at what's really going on. We're looking at our imagination, our thoughts from childhood projected out as perception, creating a whole distorted picture of reality. So that's what we have to get clear on as we deconstruct anxiety and say, hey, this thing I've been running from, this imagined boogeyman in the closet, doesn't exist, or it's not at all what I thought, and I have power to respond to it in the way I choose.
Now, I wrote something down because I copied it from your book. You said, fear causes us to see what we wish to see, not what is. I would think if I just thought of that sentence rationally, wouldn't we go the other way, trying to see the world as all cupcakes and cookies? But you're saying we actually go the other way.
Yeah, that's another really interesting point. There's a chapter in the book where I revisit the creation story, but from the perspective of these concepts that fear distorts our truth. Now, why would we want that? Because there's a way that we think we're going to have our fulfillment that's backwards. We think if I am this separate, powerful individual, if I have my autonomy separate from everybody else, then I can get more of what I want. Now that looks like it would be fulfilling, but it's a setup for fear, because all of a sudden, if I am going to be my own leader and my own God in my life, right? I'm going to go get that thing I want that will make me fulfilled, but now I'm working against all the other people out there who want the same thing. And I'm at war with them. And it might not just be people, it can be reality. Reality doesn't comply with my wishes much of the time, and I'm at war with reality. So this is where fear actually becomes, in a disguised way, our friend, so we think. I'm going, again, to consult all the advice of fear that says, watch out for this person out there who's trying to get what you want. Watch out for that bit of reality out there that's trying to take away what you want, and go to war with them. So now, yeah, even though, again, we think we're working toward our fulfillment, we're living in a war zone, and it's filled with fear all the time. This is what we have to get our hands around.
Todd, at this point in the show, we'd just like to let our audience know that you're listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm your host, Bill Horan. Our guest today is Dr. Todd Pressman, and his book is Deconstructing Anxiety. Todd, can you tell our audience the website and where we can get the book and any other information you want to give us about the book?
Surely. My website is my name, T-O-D-D, Todd Pressman, P like Peter, RESSMAN.com. And I will tell your readers that I love to give away for free an ebook of quotes and stories that can change your life. And they're really powerful, and they do have the potential to make real change in one's life. The quote I already gave about my life was filled with terrible misfortunes, most of which never happened, that's in there, but some really wonderful gems that you can sign up for if you go to the website.
And give us that website one more time.
Todd Pressman, www.toddpressman.com.
And we'll ask you that again later in the show. So to our audience, if you didn't get a chance to jot that down, you have an opportunity to get that pencil and paper and keep it handy. Todd, anxiety, as I understand it, is one of the most common psychiatric disorders. What is it that most people really get upset when they come to see you? Is there 3 or 4 areas that really cause them the most concern?
Interesting. I can't really say yes to that in one way, but at a deeper level I can. Everybody comes with their own unique background, and everybody's background is different. So, yeah, there are plenty of basic themes out there, like what we see in the diagnostic world of abandonment, fears of people who are going to be rejected or who are going to lose their money or have to face a terminal illness or something like that. But everybody's got their own spin on it, which is why it's hard to say yes to your question. On the other hand, I found in working with clients over 33 years with this deconstructing anxiety model that there are 5 what I call universal themes of loss or basic core fears that all of us buy into. And we all buy into all 5 of them. I'll list them. They are the fear of abandonment, fear of losing our identity, like the sense of who I really am, fear of losing meaning, what is my value, what's my worth, what's the value and the worth of the world. Loss of purpose is the 4th one, a little bit different from meaning. It's like I need to express myself and make my contribution to the world to have a sense of purpose. And the last one is the fear of death, which includes the fear of sickness or pain, which could obviously lead to death. So all of us have all 5 of these, but there's one that's especially predominant in our thinking. When we're children, we come into the world all happy and joyful, for the most part. Of course, there are exceptions. But then something inevitably happens that confronts us with the reality of fear. And we say, I am not safe the way I thought I was. Boom, at that moment, we buy into what I call the core fear, one of these 5 themes of loss: abandonment, loss of identity, loss of meaning or purpose, and the fear of death. And that becomes the filter through which we look at all problems in our life from then on. It becomes the basis of our personality. Like, this is how I'm going to react to the world and think of how it works and who I am. And it becomes the basis of all of our decisions. This is how I'm going to react to that interpretation. Even though I'm making it up, it's the best I could figure out as a child, I'm looking at the world as scary in this way, like everybody's going to abandon me. That's my first thought. Or I have to worry about my survival, fear of death, so forth. And from that moment on, that is how we think for the rest of our lives until we do some good work on ourselves, unless we happen to be in a moment really immersed in the moment with a sense of wholeness and completion and fulfillment.
The middle 3.
That's what makes up our minds.
The middle 3 that you mentioned, identification, meaning, and purpose, is that what a lot of us are going through now with this, COVID crisis, the virus that we're worried about? We don't know if when we go back to a job, will it be the job that we presumably loved as a teacher, an accountant, a lawyer, a doctor, a plumber? Will we even have a job? Is that bothering most of the people now, those middle 3?
Well, it's another interesting question because, again, you can't say yes as a blanket statement. Everybody's got their own unique response. So, of course, there's a lot of fear of death going around, but that might not be predominant in someone's mind if that's not what they got stuck with in childhood. Somebody else, of course, might be dealing with a loss of identity, meaning, or purpose, but it's just as possible somebody else could be feeling an abandonment fear if they live alone, for instance, and they're quarantined, right? Or if, tragically, somebody that they know and love is sick with the virus. That could be the thing that triggers their memories from childhood and makes them most upset about the situation. You know, we've got the same thing going on with the riots, which are pretty powerful in Philadelphia, where I live right now. People are looking at the situation through their own lens and having a completely unique response. On one extreme, you've got the people who are going to violence, right? That's how they're going to get control over their fear. Fear is, in this case, you know, the abuse and the prejudice that's going around that's still not resolved in our country. Somebody else could respond to what's happening in the news these days by saying, you know, I've got to cling to my loved ones because I don't feel safe out there. And on it goes.
Now, Todd, another quote that I took from your book, you say the fear of looking at fear is the first obstacle. Are most of us afraid of that? Do we try to avoid any of these topics because they make us nervous, upset, or cause anxiety?
You bet, and it's one of the theme songs in the world of psychotherapy. We psychotherapists have to convince people that it's actually a good idea to look at your fear because A, it's safe, and B, you're carrying it around with you anyhow. And it's again, distorting all of your thinking and perception when you're in fear, and it's helping you make really bad decisions. The decisions we make based on fear are designed to protect us in the moment, but they backfire every time, creating more fear, filling our minds with more ideas about what could go wrong and obscure our fulfillment. That's why we say, you know, there's either fulfillment or fear at any one moment, and they are counterbalancing each other. So the more fear, the less fulfillment. The more fulfillment, the less you're in fear.
When people come to you, do you kind of have to dig out what they're really afraid of? Or do they, you know, after a few minutes, do they say, look, I'm afraid of losing my job, or I'm afraid that I'll never get married, or won't be a good dancer, or whatever their particular problem is?
Right. Well, again, this is why I think the model of the deconstructing anxiety process is so powerful. No, people are not usually aware of what they're really afraid of, and they're not often aware that they're actually in fear. It's a subtle, constant drone in the background for most people most of the time, and yet it's so subtle and so constant that we don't even notice it, and yet it's sapping us of our life energy every moment that we're not really resting in our fulfillment. The constant drain and tension is what wears us away and makes us exhausted and stressed out, and stress we know leads to physical problems and so forth. So fear is, again, ubiquitous. It's always in the background, and we don't want to look at it. And these are two of the things that keep it so alive and prominent in our lives.
Todd, I'm thinking of a time in my life. I went to law school. I took the bar exam. And, of course, the 6 weeks before the bar exam, that was the most fear I could have. But finally, it was over. I took it. I got through it. I'm still alive. And then it was, will I pass the bar exam? And at that time, you had to wait 3 or 4 months to find out. And then after you found out you passed the bar exam, will I get a job? Do we always go default kind of to the next stage or the next fear?
Absolutely. That is one of the distortions of fear that, well, there are several of them that you just mentioned. One is the time distortion of fear. When we're in fear, it feels like it's never going to end, right? And it always passes. That's a very important principle for getting over fear. This too shall pass. But we don't know how to embody that, how to bring it to life for ourselves. And in the program, Deconstructing Anxiety, there are 3 exercises, affectionately called the Alchemist, the Witness, and the Warrior stance, which help us move through the fear safely in imagination to get to that other side where we've seen that it passed. We've seen that either it had no ability to threaten or hurt us, or there was a problem that, again, we could manage quite readily. That's the need. The key is to go through the fear safely in imagination, all the way, not skipping any steps. When we don't want to look at our fear, we skip all kinds of steps, and we refuse to go through it all the way. And we stare, like with a hypnotic fascination, at all the scary images the fear throws up for us. And we don't say, well, what's going to happen after it passes? And there's a systematic way I lay out in the book for how to do exactly that and get to the other side every time. Fear loses all of its power when you see, hey, it passed, it didn't hurt me, it didn't ruin me.
Todd, once again, at this point in the show, we want to remind our listeners that you're listening to The Secrets of Success. I'm your host, Bill Horan. You're listening to WHPC 90.3 on the voice of Nassau Community College. Our guest today is Dr. Todd Pressman. If you're impressed what you're hearing, you'll love his book, Deconstructing Fear. And Dr. Pressman, can you tell us, where can we get the book, and tell us about your website?
Sure. I guess I blurred the lines between fear and anxiety too well. It's actually called Deconstructing Anxiety.
I'm sorry. My
that's
goof.
Good. It helps me make that distinction again. It's available on Amazon or through my website at toddpressman.com, T-O-D-D-P like Peter, R-E-S-S-M-A-N.com. And once again, I would love to give anybody who signs up at the website for our free ebook of quotes and stories that can change your life. They're really quite special.
We love that word free on The Secrets of Success. And I always love to read someone else's story. It makes an impression. Personally, it stays with me much longer than just simple sentences or guidelines. So I think if it's for free, I'm going to take advantage of it, and I urge your audience to do the same. You said fear has 5 deceptions. What are they?
Well, we've already covered a couple of them. The first one is that fear is ubiquitous. It's always there in the background, except for those rare moments as adults where we're really immersed in the present moment, because, of course, fear always has us thinking about the future, and that future we're thinking about is based on the past. When we let all that go, we can be in the moment, but otherwise we're thinking about fear all the time. That's number one. Number two, fear keeps us from realizing it's the true source of any problem. So we think I've got all these myriad different problems, as many as you can think of, but it's really always anxiety at the base. And there's that one core fear we were talking about, that universal theme of loss that's at the base. Now, once we know that, that is extraordinarily powerful, because we never have to be mystified again, like what's really bothering me. And there's a process in the book called Digging for Gold, where we deconstruct any problem, and it always comes down to that same core fear, so you can prove it to yourself, that fear is the true source of any problem. The third deception, fear keeps us from looking directly at it to see it for what it is. We don't want to look directly at it. We want to run. We want to sort of manipulate it, make it go away, or mold it into a form we like. We don't want to just objectively look at it for what it is, which we must do if we're going to have the ability to do something about it. We can't fight an invisible enemy. Number 4, fear keeps us from facing and moving through it when necessary. And that means what we've already hinted at. If we face it, and you can do that just as well in your imagination, where it's perfectly safe, then we have the opportunity to discover on the other side, it isn't real. Nothing bad happened. It didn't threaten us. It wasn't what I thought it was. And finally, number 5, fear keeps us from looking at or facing the correct fear. So even if we've done the digging for gold exercise and we have been willing to face the fear, we're going to get stuck and say, I don't want to look at the real source of it all, because then I have the responsibility to do something about it. I can't fool myself anymore into thinking that this way I've been going around life, trying to protect myself from fear and make it all under my control, that doesn't work. We know after decades or however old we are, it doesn't work. So we've got to be willing courageously to look at the true fear, that core fear we bought into in childhood, and do psychological jiu-jitsu with it. Turn it around on itself with the exercises that we're talking about and discover it doesn't have any power.
Tell us about that digging for gold exercise. That sounded like something I'd like to try.
Sure, happy to. It's really the cornerstone of the whole process. It's a way of finding out in about 5 minutes or less what's buried deeply, deeply, deeply at the very bedrock of your mind and your thinking. that, used to take years on the couch, right, to figure out. This process is powerful enough to get the answer in about 5 minutes. And again, you start with any problem, and you might imagine putting it on the top left of a piece of paper. That problem, stated in a short single phrase, is then followed with a question put on the right side of that piece of paper on the same line. And the question is one of 3 different versions of the question, what's the fear underneath that problem? So here are the 3 versions. We ask of that problem, why is that upsetting to me? Or another version, what am I afraid will happen next? And the third version, what am I afraid I will miss or lose? These are just different ways of getting to the fear underneath the problem. And the answer to those questions leads to another problem. And we put that on the second line on the left side, one level deeper, closer to the core. We ask one of the 3 questions on the right side, answer with a third problem on the left side. We ask one of the 3 questions on the right side, answer with another problem, one level deeper on the left side, on and on until we get down to the core fear, which is one of these 5 universal themes of loss that we talked about: abandonment, loss of identity, meaning, purpose, and fear of death. There's a powerful moment when you see your core fear. It's like, wow, I see my whole life flashing in front of me, all kinds of associations and memories of the past, like, that's why I made the decision I did. That's how I bought into this idea that life is difficult and it doesn't have to be, and so forth. Powerful key to success right there.
Now, is it important to write these answers down, or can we just do this as we're riding on the subway or on a plane or something?
You can do it in your head just fine. The key is to not skip steps. So I always encourage people to be as precise and meticulous as you can with the answer, so you don't say, oh, I know where this is going, because we don't. To uncover all the layers of the unconscious is something we really haven't let ourselves do before, because fear keeps us from wanting to look at it, right? We talked about that.
There you go.
But you can do it. You can do it in your mind. There are some technique tips in the book, several of them, that really make the process tight and powerful so people can get the answer reliably anytime.
Dr. Pressman, we want to thank you so much. Before we wrap up, please tell us again the website.
Sure, www.toddpressman.com.
And the book is Deconstructing Anxiety. Am I correct?
Correct.
By our guest, Dr. Todd Pressman, Pressman, easy enough to remember, and an easy and inexpensive way to cure a lot of those problems that bother all of us on a day-to-day basis. Dr. Pressman, thanks so much for being with us today. I'd like our audience to know that you've been listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm your host, Bill Horan, asking you to please join us again next week at this same time when we will continue our journey to success.